Nobody can prevent damages on their own.
In every step of the design,
installation,
protection,
and maintenance of underground utilities
there are people working diligently
and innovatively
to reduce damages.
All these people need and deserve to have their stories told.
which is what we do here at Planet Underground TV.
Planet Underground TV is only made possible with the help of our sponsors.
INTREN,
HBK Engineering,
and SeeScan.
You know, I said to someone today, you know, are there people in this room that can make a difference, can actually fully change what happens in this place? And you know, the answer was, oh, I'm not sure. I said, well, why haven't we got those people? Let's find those people and let's get them into this as well, because if you sit them down here for a day or two, we will change their minds. If they've already got a brick wall, we will change their minds, because there's too many antidotes, there's too much knowledge here. There's very intelligent people here that from all aspects, and that's what the debate's about. You know, you've got to have the contractor's point of view, the locator's point of view, utilities, municipalities, everybody's point of view needs to be understood, and then we sit back and understand, well, what are the blockers here and how do we unblock them? So this has been great.
I think we're stuck in a paradigm of, frankly, education. We're gonna promote 811, everyone's gonna call 811, and then everything's gonna be fine. Right, and I think that helped 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe. Today, I think we're beyond that. I think the challenges we have are beyond just like, if everyone calls an 811 ticket, we'll be fine.
In the day and age that we're in, with all the technology we do have, it is still, it kind of baffles me that we don't talk within different industries of what we put in the ground.
Right.
And it's basically an egg hunt a lot of times to find out what's there. And at a certain point, we're gonna miss, and it'll be something big.
Almost every roundtable that I've sat in on, the words communication have come up. You know, we're not sharing information as utility owners. You know, and then it's sort of falling on the locator versus excavator. And obviously, as long as there's been contract locating and excavation occurring in the same vicinity, right? There's always been the blame game, right? Whose fault is it? Maybe it's time for a better system.
This has been a real problem. I've characterized our crews sometimes as archaeologists, where, you know, they don't have the brushes and the dental picks, but they're close to it as they begin to excavate down and uncover what's there. I mean, these are real problems that I think we're faced with, and we need answers to this. We need to figure this out and come up with solutions that will keep the public safe, keep our crews safe, increase quality of life, and increase our efficiency.
You know, and you dig as many potholes as we do putting gas, so we are finding exactly where every facility is.
Yeah, sure.
And we bury it. And we don't take a data point. We just bury it, and then we come back and dig it up again, right? Hey, we didn't hit it, and we put the new one in, and we didn't tell you where that was either.
The excavators don't dig in a perfect world. They have a lot of abandoned utilities and sometimes mismapped utilities to deal with. They have crowded right-of-ways, and on top of everything else, they're dealing more and more with late tickets.
At the end of the day, they're still doing what they did back in the middle 70s, right? They're taking a call, and they're taking that information, and then they're putting it out to the owners of those underground facilities. So in that regard, there isn't a lot that's changing.
Let's look at Uber, right? Can they Uberize, if that's a word, you know, the 811 system?
Assisting with narration on this episode is my advisory board, Dennis Jarnicki, Ted Anderson, and Fred Lesage. The conversations like you see my advisory board having, they're taking place in offices, hallways, and job sites all around the country. We're just fortunate that we can bring the best and the brightest in the industry to our roundtable so you can see the conversations in one place.
About 40% of all locates in certain areas are not in conflict, right? So there was nothing in conflict with the dig area. And potentially a lot of those, someone who had the prints can determine, right? I'm not saying all of them.
Right.
Right. And right now, people just locator after locator, and then everyone has finite resources. Someone could say, well, hey, what's wrong with that? That's safer, isn't it? No, it's not, because if you're sending locators to these that are probably not in conflict, you're spending less time at the high, at the high risk ones.
Not hitting the target for the locates obviously puts the contractor in a bind. There's typically schedules. The utility owners that we're working with, and you work with Doug, have scheduled dates that they have to meet. We get out there with the locate, it's not done, so it's really the decision of the crew. What do we got to do here, right, as a company? So for us, economically, that downtime and that wait and that non-productivity kind of hits several ways, right? We're not getting anything done. We have the cost of the crew, and then we may get fined or have liquidated damages based off not making those end dates. Or we have to use overtime or add crews to make it up, right, in our nickel.
The tough thing with the one-call system as it's done now, and with the due dates that are required, usually if a locating service provider falls behind, the tickets don't stop coming in.
Right.
So digging out of that hole becomes very difficult, and the timeline to erase that issue becomes extended.
So if you're going into to bid, and ultimately the utility who's hiring you to put the facility in is going to pay the bill, right?
Yeah.
I hate to
Yep, they are.
hate to say that, be the person to say it. So you say, hey, look, if I can get this done in 5 days, but historically it's going to take me 8 because of the locate downtime, I got to bill you 8. So I'm building that into the bid. So I'm building the risk in, right? As opposed to working with the utility and the other stakeholders, say, how do we drive that out to get the cost back down? And then the way we contract locating. So if it's a commodity and I've paid the contract locator the lowest price possible, and they're staffing to historical norms plus 5%, it puts us all in the bind, right? So it's the model.
You mentioned that maybe some of your contractors now carry locating equipment, is that right?
Yep.
How are they doing with that?
Yeah.
They've taken it onto themselves to go, all right, we're gonna they still have the locates and the one call, but then they verify.
And that's
right?
not uncommon.
Yeah.
That really is not uncommon.
And that goes back to a whole culture of a company too, right? I mean, that's a safety and how we do business thing, right? It's, are we gonna put the training? Are we gonna give our guys the resources? There's a lot of things we look at when we look to insure companies and companies that look to come with us too, right? And we're looking at, is there that commitment there to do what's right and to the best of their knowledge?
You get these young kids out of high school or out of the military, and it's a really hard job. It's a very stressful job because we'll always remind them that someone could die if they do it wrong. And I think it's very stressful. And there's policies in place. If you have 5 hits, you get fired. So it adds to your stress. Sometimes they're working 7 days a week. I think we need to do a better job in our community of communicating projects that are coming up and not putting so much pressure, because I know months in advance when I'm going to do a project at my house. Why can't I call 811 and say, on July 17th, I'm going to be doing this? And when they get a chance, they go out and do that locate. And I just see so much pressure on these young kids. They don't last because of the pressure, or they don't last because of the pressure. They go too fast and they make a mistake. So I just think we really need to invest in them.
We do something similar with our customer in Minnesota and Colorado. And they're a dual utility. They do natural gas and electric, and we mark the natural gas and electric. And that does help mitigate some of the resource drain,
Right.
In those situations. But again, it kind of tends to limit itself to what that crew's area of expertise is.
Yes.
They're typically not comfortable locating fiber lines. They're not
Right.
comfortable locating water. They're not comfortable locating facilities. They don't have a knowledge of how that system is built and how they can access, points to initiate locates.
So when I left the contracting world and came over to the utility world, so I worked for ComEd, I'll have to say it was a big learn for me that our construction people didn't know how a gas system ran.
Right.
They didn't know how a phone system, they worked around it every day. Yeah. They dug poles, they did all that stuff. They really didn't understand it. So we really sold this on the whole locating, going out and doing, the pre-locates on this thing, that you're not locating, you're verifying. And it really was a long discussion between our labor and between the union that this is what we're asking to do. We're not holding anybody accountable because they're not locating. So if they miss something, you know, they're not going to be held accountable for it. But what it does is it kind of gets everybody in tune with thinking safe.
We have probably eight or nine what we would call professional locators that just locate for us. And then we have locators with each of the crews that they would verify. But it's a different commitment, right? Yeah. So it's taking on that cost, and then we have to balance, okay, but what's our production increase from that, reduce damages and so forth. But it's looking at those models, and some utilities are open to that model, some aren't. So if you're going into to bid, and ultimately the utility who's hiring you to put the facility in is going to pay the bill, right? Yeah. I hate to say that, be the person to say it. So you say, hey, look, if I can get this done in 5 days, but historically it's going to take me 8 because of the locate downtime, I got to bill you 8. So I'm building that into the bid. So I'm building the risk in, right? As opposed to working with the utility and the other stakeholders. Say, how do we drive that out to get the cost back down?
I think it's largely the entire one call damage prevention and locating has been largely unchanged for 25, 30 years, right? Well, a lot of new technologies, methods, and systems and communication. Now you got cell phone data everywhere, 98, 99% of where people live, right? And the systems that have been developed after the American system, I think, have kind of embraced a lot of those technologies more. 30 years ago, you couldn't call in a ticket and have someone send you prints of the area, within seconds, within minutes. The technology wasn't there.
Right.
Now you can, right? And we don't use that here.
There's going to be inherent efficiencies there because the excavator is not going to pay a guy to sit there. He's not going to pay him to locate a huge area that hasn't been white lined instead of locate it. He's not going to do anything unnecessary. It drives the overall efficiency of the system.
Well, I think then, if we're going to enable anybody to be able to locate anything, right? Not just the owner, not just the locator who's employed by the gas company locating gas, and then the person employed by telephone locating telephone. We're going to get to that notion of having a repository that all of us put our information into, so then that can be taken by whomever is doing the locating.
We look at the excavator of today really embracing technology. They're sophisticated organizations that look for ways to become more efficient, to provide more safety for their workers. They also embrace process change. More and more, we see excavators using locating equipment to provide information that the tired 811 system cannot.
That's one of the areas that we've been really focusing on this year is being able to, essentially, in the simplest terms, being able to use excavations out in the field as information. So taking advantage of openings in the field to make sure that we're recording data, and once that opening is created, we know where our gas facility is. So one of the things that we've looked at is our usage of kind of a supplementary locating technique with marker balls. We've been using, so essentially a device that transduces a signal that we can pick up. It's kind of a point of interest. And so, we've really been engaging the community out there, the excavation community to, when you have an opening out there and we do have facilities in there, let's work together to figure out what we can do to make sure that, once you close that opening, we know where that facility is the next time you come back.
Well, and it's funny you talk about the utility owners being reluctant.
Yeah.
So there's a city that we work with now that whenever they put in new water and sewer, they're dropping marker balls at strategic locations. Well, they've offered the other people that they cross, the gas, the electric, et cetera, they say, when we cross your line, do you want us to put in a marker ball? We'll do it. And they've said no, which is just really hard to understand.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, this is a perfect opportunity. You've already got exposed, update your maps and all that to the contractor who's doing this. The contractor's like, nope, don't want to do it. And I'm like, why not? It's a perfect opportunity. You could charge them a few more bucks. The contractor told me, like point blank, because if I brought this idea up to the utility, they don't want me to do it for free.
The utilities in the ground don't move unless somebody moves them. And so once you identify where they are, that data is forever.
Well, and that's a really key one too. So there's been a lot of discussion I've heard in the last day or so about the collection of accurate data that's captured during construction, whether it's on the installation of the utility itself or other things encountered along the way. one of the major things that prohibits that from happening to begin with is the presence of a good design base to even start with.
Right.
So if there was no design base to even start with, then any measurements that are captured don't have a good reference to tie back to. Or if they are tied back to, say, a perceived right-of-way or edge of pavement or something along those lines, there's really nowhere to put them because that reference then doesn't exist back in the engineer's office either. So the production of a good design is also the basis for the capture of a good record.
Right.
And the lower the quality of the design, I think, is proportionate to the quality of the record that's not maybe captured in the field. It might have been captured very well, but there's nowhere to put it.
Right.
There's no way to reflect it without that accurate
Well,
base.
and where does it go? I mean, and those are the other things I've heard today is, you know, once those records, the red lines, you know, where does it go? I mean, and there's got to be some place to be able to store all that information for the guy that's coming behind you maybe next week doing the same thing you're doing.
Another thread to launch here is I'm going to guess that 10 years from now, the role of the operator is going to be almost insignificant. The operators are going to be called AIs. They're going to be artificially intelligent systems because this is a big data system.
So you're getting at more on the construction side of things, that this
Well, you
3D
talked about
model-
identifying conflicts.
Okay.
I would say
Well,
identifying
okay.
conflict is going to be a pure operator. Even designing, you know, if you just say, I want to take my fiber from here to here, okay, if you have a good data set, the AI will just design it for you. That's a highly constrained thing. The AIs will do that type of design work.
There's a lot of turnover, a lot of new people coming into this industry, and I'm assuming the other industries are similar. That is a great opportunity to implement change, right? With the younger kids coming in.
Well, they don't have
learning.
preconceived notions
Correct.
about how things should be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is the way it needs to be going forward in the future, and that's where we need to get that message across of change.
So the veterans of the underground utility world are leaving in large numbers, and new people are coming in to take their place. The new younger people really embrace technology. They grew up with it, they understand it. But the one thing that they really need is training.
I think we need to educate our engineers a lot better that are doing the design work to get out in the field and understand a little bit about how things go on the ground. I heard one of the speakers talk earlier this morning in their discussions about you can't replace that hands-on knowledge of what the network is. And I think part of our training program, we're training people about 3D, but we're actually not training them about what the network is to understand what they should be looking at. I think we're really struggling in that area. I think we've lost a little bit of that hands-on value that we're now trying to bring, you know, a much bigger volume of work into perspective without having that background to do it. That's scary to me.
Mapping and locating and so on and so forth of all the different utilities, that's a great idea. But there's nothing better than a man in the trench with a shovel, with some experience to find those utilities. Your bottom man is your key to each of your crews, and even the locator
Absolutely.
would talk to the bottom man. The bottom man can instruct him what he needs. It just, you have to go back to the basics. Return to the first day of digging.
Recognize that hand digging is a lost art. So, like back in the day, I mean, you could dig 20 test holes with a shovel, and you get some of these younger guys, and it's not a bad thing. But they don't have the skill. You can tell that the vacuum excavation has become much more of a prominent method, which again is good. But they'll go out and get 4, and not because they're lazy. They just don't know how to do it.
Well, there's digging and there's efficient digging.
From my sense too, and I think it's an issue in construction, it seems like, you know, for my father's generation, there was people who wanted to get into these trades as a skilled profession. And it seems like the turnover rate that I see, the younger generation, it's almost like a stopgap. It's like they have nothing else, so they kind of get into the construction world. And I think the level and I guess the depth of experience that people have is much more shallow and less today. And I sound like my dad. I sound like an old guy. But it's true, and it's hard because the guys who've been with us for 20 years, 30 years, they don't have much time left. And the value that they bring to especially directional drilling, because that's where we have the most issues with locating. It's a little scary because what happens when those guys are gone, and they save you so much money
on the little things
from not hitting things and from finding ways to get pipe in the ground in tight situations. So.
There is an absolute epidemic of a shortage of skilled labor for all assets of our business, whether that's the construction side or the machine side or the locating side. The skilled trade and the epidemic of lack of talented young folks coming into it, and with as many boomers are retiring and Gen Xers that are doing the same or in different industries that might be a little more academia, we got to bring to light the opportunity that's out there, and that opportunity is real money that learning a trade provides.
It's a challenge to get that information out of that superintendent's head who's been doing it for 30 years. He knows where every valve is, he knows where everything is, he knows where, he remembers all of that stuff, and it's all right here. And now we got to figure out how to get it from here into the new technology and get it to someplace where it's usable by more than one person. You think, let me ask a question, do you guys think that we have the new people coming in? Do you think we have enough head count? Do we have enough folks to replace those that are going to be retiring in the next 5 years?
I personally don't, because many friends in the utility contracting world, and it's getting tougher and tougher for this age group to get into construction.
I think within the world that all of us are in, within the utility, pipe, wire, conduit world, underground, above, it wouldn't be shy to say it's probably not the most glamorous or sexy of businesses in which those are growing up wishing that every day as a small child, unless they're exposed to it through family, are thinking that's the area I want to go in. But if we could do a better job of really showing the opportunity inside that industry. I mean, it's an industry that's going to continue to grow. It's ever changing. It's being tended to regularly with upgrades, et cetera. It's a phenomenal career path. I look at it from the engineering perspective. I know you see it on the construction side. Also, the great careers that can be built in here. It's going to have what maybe in the past on the construction side didn't have that great technology spin. You can go into that business now and you're going to learn to be a great tradesperson, but it also can be a great technical person, and it's an exciting career path. It's just, can you get enough people turn to it to say, this is the direction I want to go.
Think of how many years it's going to take for us to implement this. We have a number of people in the utility industry that have been around for years. You can be in the utility industry for 20 years and still be the new guy. With the apprentices and all the people coming into the industry that are younger today, the millennials, in order for them to think in the way that we're talking about the future and make that the everyday norm, they're going to have to, this program's going to have to take many years before we can get there, before the forward thinking is there and actually implemented into the culture of these companies and the industry. Kind of like the seatbelt. It took 25 years to train people to do that. How long is it going to take to change the mindset and culture of safety due to technology out in the marketplace?
I've actually been very pleased the way our 25-year veteran hardcore foremen, guys that just been in every trench in the world, have actually adopted the technology change. That is where I thought I'd find the fight, is with them. But actually they've been very good about adopting it. I sometimes find the fight with the younger ones because technology almost distracts them.
The younger generations almost have to have a mission that they're working towards something. As an industry, I think we need to even drive the attitude more, that we're driving toward a more positive solution for the customers, for the vendors, for the people building the infrastructure going forward. We've got all the digital technology, we've got the information that they're used to using. That kind of stuff is fun, and we need to continue to push the technology, but also the purpose of why we're out there, which I think sometimes gets lost in the mix. And that'll help us attract, I think, even better, more high-tech, more energized, younger generational people, if you will, to drive the business forward.
It used to be that you could make a call in my day, and you knew the water crews and things like that would come out and verify for you. Now they come out and say, well, you know, it's not on any of our maps, we're not going to do anything for you. So then what do? You take the chance and you drill it yourself.
And then you have, on top of that, you have a client that changes their mind on what's priority and what's not priority.
That never happens.
No, I know. As you're very well aware of.
What we need to do is make the utility responsible for where his stuff is in the ground. And it gets back to a little bit of some of the stuff we talked about with the old stuff, like where there were standards for, you know, the water's on the east side of the street, the gases or the sewers on the west side of the street, those kinds of things. You know, if in those days, the utilities did know where their stuff was in the ground. We went to directional drilling because it was an incredibly efficient way of doing things. Man, lost track of that.
In the past history of damage prevention, there seems to have always been a message. Directly or indirectly, the excavator was the problem.
You know, CGA just came out with, here not too long ago, 60% of damages are caused by excavators. Well, you know, do we solve that? I don't think the answer is solving that is giving them mapping to make them have another avenue to make a decision other than following the law. Right. As if we give them another tool out there, I don't see it as helping, because I think they'll use that in a way to bypass the system that they're already not following all the time.
I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword at times, really. I mean, yeah, it's going to help out the excavator sometimes, but, you know, other times they may decide that they don't need to call in for a refresh because they can see where it's at in the print. From my perspective, you know, if that's something from a company that we're comfortable paying a contract locating company or locating in-house to go out there and physically make that determination, then, you know, that's where I would rather be with it as well. You know, take the burden off the homeowner, off the excavator, and put it back on us to locate our facilities.
Yeah, our Office of Underground Coordination Work is one of that unique ones in the nation. And in addition to that, we start thinking about putting a compiled drawing and control that database to it in the city of Chicago. If it works, we're still on the beginning stage of that one. So we have some test pilot program we are about to kick off. If it works, I think that will be an eye opener for everybody, and the damages should be going down. Because right now, that database does not exist for a compiled drawings. So it's not sharing each other.
You can get archives that go back to 1896 on different things. You know, when the first Western Union cable was put in here, some of the Western Union was put in before the street was even raised. Mm-hmm. So I think between the modern era, which I'll call now, and say the 20s and 30s and 40s when things were initially put in, we've lost that record keeping.
Well, I think the blending of the archival records that exist, that Larry's referring to, and GIS mapping systems could help blend those two together to bring those standards back. I don't think there's a central mapping repository of GIS information, which is what's really needed, some sort of cloud-based GIS system where anyone could tap into that information, and almost like Superman with X-ray goggles on, there are the utilities.
Actually, the issue right now is not that the technology is not there. The technology is there. There are sensors, there are ways to communicate. Right now, the world is around how do we put it all together? Are there standards for how the data is communicated? How do we use this talking about the cloud itself? What you're really talking about is interconnected clouds now.
I think we could be a national or worldwide, we could be a model on damage prevention.
The excavator is a solution. Damage prevention results are driven by the excavator, and it's important to understand that as time goes on, we're going to find that more and more true. Planet Underground TV would like to thank the following sponsors for helping us produce the Roundtable.